When you're in a group of men that affirms you, that you can trust, being able to laugh, being able to fellowship, express your emotions viscerally. Sometimes when you get mad, you can't be in control, proper, tolerant all the time. You need to be in a safe place where it's like, I'm not going to be judged. I have a wealth of long-term friendships. That's how I consider myself wealthy. Very blessed.
You're a man living in the modern world in a time when men and manhood are not what they once were. You live life on your own terms. You're self-sufficient. You think for yourself and you march to the beat of your own drum. When life knocks you down, you get back up because in your gut, you know that's what men do. You're a badass and a warrior. And on the days when you forget, we are here to remind you who you really are.
Welcome to the Sovereign Man Podcast, where we aim to make men masculine again. I'm your man, Nikki Ballou, and we have a great guest for you today, David Savage. Welcome, David.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Good to have you here. David, you are very much involved in the work of men, of helping elevate men, manhood, masculinity, and you've got a hell of a personal story of how you got here. Why don't you start there?
Well, I was fortunate enough to grow up with an Air Force career master sergeant, dad who made me big on God and country. I was born and raised in San Angelo, Texas. We did live for 4 years in Darmstadt, Germany, while he spied in the Cold War on the Russians.
That was a Cold War spy?
He was. He actually worked for NSA. I never knew what he did.
Damn, brother. No such agency, that NSA? No such agency?
Yes, that's exactly right. He in fact, I always asked him, Dad, what do you do? And he goes, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. So it was very mysterious until his funeral, when I finally asked his buddies, can you talk about it yet? And they gave me 2 books that it was declassified information that happened, prior to 1980. And one was called The Puzzle Palace, and then the other one was called The Ultra Secret. And so they did all the code cracking.
The Puzzle Palace?
Yeah. So that's what is kind of the nickname for the NSA headquarters there in Langley, I think. And so
aren't they? They're in Maryland, aren't they? The NSA is not Langley. Langley's the CIA.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. You're right. It is Maryland. So it was a long time ago. But so I was looking at his military record and like, man, he's in his Air Force uniform, but he's with all these other people with different uniforms. And I've been trying to piece all this together. But at any rate, so moved back to San Angelo, and then he taught that school at the Security Wing Air Force Base, there, Goodfellow Air Force Base. And so I grew up in West Texas, and I had a terrific scouting experience growing up, became an Eagle Scout, wanted to beat my older brother had become one. So I got mine before, I was at 15 when I got mine. Got my
rickety dog, dude. That's pretty awesome, eh?
It is. Yeah. I got
your brother.
Oh man, he was, fortunately he had some pretty high bars. And so I was very competitive. I'm still very competitive. I think it's because I'm the youngest of 4 children, and he got, most of the attention, and there's 2 sisters and then me. So I was like, hey, what about me? So anyway, so I always aspired to beat him. He played the clarinet. I got his clarinet, I wanted to be first chair and all that. It really kind of set a real pattern and trajectory for aiming high in my life. And so I got my Eagle Scout, I got my gold, silver, bronze palms, and then I founded a co-ed Explorer post because I got interested in girls, and I'd already kind of gotten all the ranks I could. So I was at a backpacking and high adventure Explorer post, and then I was fortunate enough to get academic scholarship to Texas A&M University, enrolled in nuclear engineering. And in 1978 and in 1979, 3 Mile Island kind of changed the outlook for civilian nuclear engineering work, and I'm claustrophobic, so the Navy submarine wasn't going to work for me. And so I changed majors, got a civil engineering degree, graduated in 82, got my professional engineer's license in 87, and then I converted into chemical engineering, worked for Nalco Chemical Company for 31 years, was purchased by Ecolab in 2011, and then retired at 2018 as a global corporate accounts manager level position, and decided to write a book. So I wrote this book because I was upset about how the Boy Scouts of America had been torn down. I mean, The BSA, the Scout Oath is on my honor. I'll do my duty to do my best, to God and my country, to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. Who could be against that? Well, there were a lot of people. That's exactly right. And so they tore it down, and it's not even a shadow of itself in my view. And so now I support trail life, but I decided to write a book kind of about my scouting experiences, but also just to help young men. I went through a divorce, so we kind of, you and I have talked about that and our experiences with that. I remarried. I picked up 2 stepsons in that process, and their father was an alcoholic and died of cirrhosis in 2005, which was really quite sad. And they were young, and they went kind of spinning out of control. And so I have a soft spot in my heart for young men, especially ones who grew up without a father or a coach or a minister, somebody, that poured that chutzpah, that gravitas into them so that they had some ballast in their boat and a little wave doesn't tip them over. And unfortunately, there's a lot of young men out there who were raised in single parent families, alcoholic dads, workaholic dads, and they just didn't have anybody modeling good male, positive, masculine, Christian manhood. And so that's what I'm all about in my retired life.
You know what, brother? All of that is super true. So tell me, what do you think is the problem that has allowed this leftist rot to infect Western civilization? And how do we overcome it? Because if we don't overcome it, I think humanity is going to descend into at least 1,000 years of darkness.
I fear a poor outcome, as you do, like that. And I think how it manifested, I think it was the culture war, so in the 60s and 70s. And, there were some legitimate reasons where women were, not getting equal pay for equal work and things. And they, so they had legitimate beefs, but feminism just went too far, with, in the 70s.
You really think that was legitimate? Because I think it was the Soviet psyop. That's what I think. No, I'm being straight up with you. I think it was the Soviet psyop. I don't think there was a damn thing legitimate about it.
Well, I think that they do, and there's a lot of evidence of this too, in Chinese and Iran, because it is the rot from within. That's what has taken down every great civilization. And so, they know they can't, it has to be asymmetric warfare. And so if you can, in fact, I just did a podcast, which was a monologue, which I don't do that often, about the unintended consequences and the idolatry of AI. Because, now it's getting so hard to discern the truth. I guess if there was just one sentence to answer your question, that would be it. People no longer seek the truth and can discern the truth. And a lot of that has to do with your faith. And this country, says, in God we trust on every piece of currency that we have, but we're not really doing that anymore. And so it's all been this tear down. First we lost the higher education system, and then we lost the primary and secondary education system. And so that's how you get the next generation. And so now we've got a bunch of young men who are confused if they are, proud of anything positive and masculine. They're like, well, that's toxic masculinity. That's not good. Don't hold the door open for me. Don't protect me. There's this false narrative out there of this egalitarianism where they're equal. And there's all these television shows where women are punching men and knocking them out and everything. And we know that's not true. I mean, it is. It is. So that's kind of how we got here, in a thumbnail is, and these are one of my favorite quotes. I think Edmund Burke said it. It says, evil prevails in the world when good men do nothing. And that's what's been happening. There's a lot of good men that have done nothing. And we've been tolerant. We're told to be tolerant and, okay, go along to get along and all that. And we've just allowed our shore to erode away.
So many years ago, I read a book called Willing Accomplices. It was written by a man named Kent Clisby, a former CIA case officer. And basically, the thesis of the book was that the West, and in particular the United States, have been the subject of a multi-decade infiltration by communist agitators that were initially funded and supported by the Soviet Union. And their job was to subvert the US from within, to use its very openness against it. And
Right.
there was a German communist named William Unsenberg. He was personally hand-selected by Vladimir Lenin back in 1917 to come to the United States and get people to help bring down its institutions, in particular, education, media, and Hollywood. And if you look at, films, textbooks, newspapers in the 1910s, 20s, they're all pro-American. And starting in the 30s, subtly, some of the newspapers changed. Subtly, some of the Hollywood movies changed. And by the 90s, the infiltration was pretty close to complete. And right now, those ideas have taken root in the United States and in Western civilization in general. And a big part of it was to weaken the family, because they knew that if they weakened the family, they'd weaken men, and that weak men means that the enemies of Christendom, of Western civilization, can take over without firing a shot. That really is the long and the short of it is. There's many people who think, oh my God, that's a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory, man. There's plenty of evidence out there for it. There was a KGB country destabilization expert who defected to the West in the 80s. His name is Yuri Bezmenov. If you go on YouTube, there's a 2-hour-long video of him talking about how they go about destabilizing countries.
Yeah, I read the Oswald Chambers. I'm trying to remember the title of that book, but it was the same thing. He was a Communist Party member, and then hid microfilm in his pumpkin patch, and it was all that.
Witness.
Yes, that's it. Witness. That's it. So, and fascinating, because if you're right, America was very enamored with communism, especially, the Hollywood and everything. And so it was effective. And unfortunately, like you said, they seem to have gotten to control institutions, and then they've pursued their agenda through the courts, where they don't have to win elections. And so, we're going to take the 10 Commandments, out of schools, out of public buildings, everything has just been one lawsuit after another. And so lawfare has been a big part of their strategy as well.
Yeah. And see, what works is to have grassroots folks like you, like me, and like others go and talk about these issues to people one-on-one, and one in a small group. Because if you get enough people to see the truth, you can beat these guys. One thing they don't have going for them is they're on the side of wrong. We're on the side of right. I mean, let's just
the truth prevails. It stands.
Yeah. So I just rather we beat them now and not in 1,000 years.
You know what? I agree with that very much, which is why I wrote my book and why I'm doing, what I'm doing with the podcast and everything else. Because I think there's a stirring, you have millennials, you have Gen Xers, and how they kind of generalize. That's probably not fair to any generation, but they're hungry. They've actually grown up in enough of false, narrative being marketed to for everything, and that's why they're kind of going back to, like, they want vintage things, they want analog equipment now, they want turntables, because they've tried all that stuff, and what we all learn, it doesn't satisfy, because it's fake. And so I think that there's a group of us, the baby boomers, which have not stewarded everything well. We have to accept our responsibility for that, and we've talked about accepting responsibility, but we're still here, and we're the last generation that grew up without these screens. And so we're the only ones who can educate people. Look, this is what it was like before the screens, and before, we were all lazy. We had the ability to think critically. We were taught to think critically, to question, to debate, the classical Greek education, methodologies. But today there's just laziness, and that's, sloth, which then, in my view, equates with ignorance. It's like, I'll just ask Siri, I'll ask Alexa, I'll ask ChatGPT. And so somebody's writing that algorithm and they're just accepting that as truth. And that is not, in fact, truth. And that's very dangerous, I think, because they've just lost the ability to think critically, just like doing like a math problem. If you can't do it on a calculator, they don't know how to do it anymore. Well, what happens, when we don't have batteries or calculators, we just lose it all. I mean, you think about it. I read another book that was like a fictional book, and it was like 10 seconds after, and it was supposition was that there was this giant electromagnetic pulse that came from a solar flare.
Yeah, William Fortune.
So it just wipes everything out, and
all those books, they're great.
You know what? That happened. There was an electromagnetic pulse by a solar flare that was in the 1850s that could wipe out all of Elon Musk's satellites and Starlink and everything else. It just hasn't happened again since then, and we didn't have satellites up there, so we didn't really experience much in the way of consequences. But that's very likely to happen. In the cosmic world of God, which time we don't understand. It could just be gone in a second, and my daughter went to Baylor University for 4 years, and I don't think she could drive to Waco today without turn-by-turn instructions, from Google Maps. And that's not good.
No, it's not. It's not. The William Fortune, 1 second after, day after, year after books are fantastic. And the truth of the matter is, if we have an electromagnetic flare hit the Earth, and we're basically taking down all the satellites, all the electronic devices that we have, we're screwed. We're completely screwed, brother. You know what I'm saying?
I do, man. I think I'll be a little better off because I was an Eagle Scout, man. I learned I could start a fire with some sticks and things, That's why I love these survival shows and stuff, and why I bought an Airstream. I got my little bug out plan already in place.
You are the man. You are the man. God.
Be prepared. Be prepared, man. It's a simple motto that I learned as a Boy Scout.
Yeah. It's facts. So love it. Love it. How prepared am I compared to you? Probably not as prepared as I could be, but I can make a fire. I can cook outdoors. I can find my way around without Google Maps if I need to.
Yeah.
I got to go learn how to hunt. That's one thing I haven't learned how to do, but I should go learn how to hunt. And
come on down to Texas. Yeah. Not much hunting in Toronto.
No. Well, in Ontario, there's a fair amount of hunting.
Is there? Okay. Yeah.
There is, but there's rules and regulations, which I'm sure you don't have in Texas. So it's better to come down over there.
Right.
But got to learn how to do that, and got to just learn how to have what I call man skills.
Right.
Man skills, which are survival skills, essentially. You got to be able to survive if all the advantages of modernity are gone.
Well, so my kids were like, my daughter and my son were maybe 12 and 14, and I decided to hire a retired sheriff's deputy, to teach him like a personal handgun class. And we went to the range, and it was very, very strict, about all the range rules and everything. But there's just something about the confidence of knowing if you are in some, good grief, we've got all these horrible mass shooter situations and things. If some gun slides across the floor and you're the person who can pick it up and do something, you need to know how to use it. And so I taught them, and with a professional, how to shoot. They both have pistols now. They know how to shoot. But there's just this confidence about, hey, I'm ready to handle things because I've been prepared. I've been given these skills. And a lot of young men today have never been taken fishing. They don't know how to tie a knot. They don't know how to bait a hook. And so what's happened is they basically just withdraw, from any situation where they could possibly be exposed, for that vulnerability. It's not that there's anything wrong with them. They just were never taught. And so that's what I'm trying to do is, and you know what? It's fun. It's fun to go backpacking. It's fun to go out there and learn these things because, again, that's that ballast that I was talking about in your boat. So then, you know, the wave doesn't tip you over. You're okay. All right. I'm just going to rudder my way into that wave and, you know, we're going to keep pressing on. And I think that's, you know, how we prepare people. And it's not like everybody gets a participation trophy. It's like, man, I lost. You know what? I don't like losing. So what do I need to do to win the next time or to be better the next time? Well, I need to, you know, have some kind of a strategy. I need to have some workout regimen, whatever it is that you're competing in. You know, a participation trophy doesn't teach you anything. No. And then you get out there in the real world, once you're a young adult and you lose and you're crushed by it because you've never lost before and you don't know how to overcome it and say, hey, you know, I'm doubling down. I'm getting back up. I'm trying again. Now I just have some experience. I've learned something. It's not really a loss. I've just gotten some experience. Unless you repeat the failure.
No. Amen, man. I think it's a beautiful thing what you're saying. It really is. You learn when you try things, and making mistakes is the best way to learn how to do things properly next time. Mm-hmm. It's true.
Well, my favorite show on television is on the History Channel, and it's called Alone, and it's a survival show, and they bring in these experts, and they have to film themselves, and I did a podcast on that too, called the Top 10 Reasons Why Alone's the best show on television, and then I've had a guest who was actually a participant, a contestant on Alone, who should have actually won. He killed a moose, and he had more meat, and he caught more fish and everything, but his faith, he lived his faith on that episode or that show, that season. It was just incredible. His name's Timber Cleghorn. And I'll tell you what, and in the end, he said, you know what? I got everything I needed out of this experience. And he was just there's one other guy and him, you know, were left. And then the last guy. So 83 days living north of the Arctic Circle in Canada, up there along the Mackenzie River Delta. And and it's cold, and he has to build his shelter. He has to, you know, process all of his food. He has to survive in this frigid conditions. But man, that show is just fascinating because not only are you learning about the survival skills, but also the psychology of being by yourself, alone with your thoughts. And I think that was pretty eye-opening to a lot of people during the pandemic, when a lot of the ways that we entertain ourselves and distract ourselves to keep us from having to think about things we don't want to think about were removed. And so now you're like, And some of the guys who are the best at the survival skills actually end up tapping out of that show because, you know, they got good at survival skills because they retreated into the wilderness because of, you know, whatever, emotional difficulties, alcoholism, whatever. And then they're having to sit there and process that pain, you know, and they just like, well, I'm out, you know, I don't want to do that. But some have too. But it's just very fascinating to watch that show from the psychological aspect of it.
I've never seen that show, but sounds like a cool show. I should go check it out.
It is.
Yeah. This fella who was a guest on your podcast, I'd love an introduction, man. I'd like to have a conversation.
Yeah. Timber Cleghorn. I can do that for sure.
That'd be great. So David, why do you think men need, and don't even know that they need, masculine only spaces?
Well, because I think it's the way God wired us. You know, it's just, you know, Jesus, he was our model and he was perfect. And he said, hey, I'm going to have a group of 12 men and we're going to do things together. And I'm going to teach them. I'm going to teach them through story and parable. And that's actually what I try to do through my podcast, Wrestling with the Inner Man. I haven't mentioned the name of it, by the way. And
there you go.
So I think that, you know, just brotherhood is so important. I mean, all of the great movies, war movies, you know, it's just that band of brothers, you know, that opportunity
that's a great movie, man. That's great theory.
Yeah, right. To go through something together, you know, 300, you know, with Sparta, and, you know, all of these movies are about the brotherhood and the bond of, you know, there's the three kinds of love. There's the filial love, which is like that brotherly love. And then there's agape love, God love, and then eros, the erotic love. But that brotherly love is a huge bond, and you really need that and want that because you need to have someone be your accountability partner. That's the iron sharpens iron thing, and it's biblical, and we have to have it, or you're just going to be stunted in your growth and development.
Yeah, amen. Amen. Um, so why do you think when men become a part of a masculine only space, something wakes up in them?
That's a good question. I haven't really pondered that before. I would say, we're all looking for a sense of belonging. I think if there was one human condition that was just universal across all people groups and everything else, it's like, I want this sense of belonging. And that's why, young men who don't have good family life are drawn to the gangs, because they offer that. So you have this sense of belonging when you're there and you're like, hey, these are my people. This is my tribe. This is who I belong with. And we do these things together and we're doing life together and we celebrate our victories together and we encourage one another. We've talked about Robert Lewis and his book, Raising a Modern Day Knight, and having, manhood ceremonies and saying, hey, you know what you did? We don't have cheerleaders for one another anymore. Once you become like a young adult man in America, you're just, everything you could be, in some kind of high school athletic, college athletics. After that, there's nobody cheering for you anymore. Everybody's trying to pick on you because somehow, you're perceived as having privilege that you didn't earn or whatever. And so then you're just always in this defensive posture. But when you're in a group of men that affirms you, that laughs, that you can trust and say, hey, this is a safe place. I think I love jokes. I know many jokes. I tell a lot of jokes. I probably shouldn't tell some of the jokes that I tell, but everybody can't be offended all the time by everything someone else says. I went to Texas A&M University. There's all kinds of Aggie jokes out there. We paid Jimbo Fisher $70 million to go away as our coach. A dubious distinction. There's all kinds of Aggie jokes. But I don't take that to heart. That doesn't. I'm just not that easily offended because I'm not that fragile. Really. And so I think being around other men, being able to laugh, being able to fellowship, being able to express your emotions viscerally that you have, sometimes when you get mad, you're like, I need to vent. I need to tell somebody about this. And I need to really let that steam off. And, you can't be in control, proper, tolerant all the time. You need to be in a safe place where it's like, I'm not going to be judged. I have a wealth of long-term friendships. I pledged the Alpha Tau Omega fraternity. We helped start the fraternity at A&M in 1979. And there's a guy who lives not far from me, who was in my fraternity. And, we've been friends for, 45 years. And that guy, you've said on your show before, who are you going to call when you're in that Mexican prison at 3 a.m. in the morning? That Clay Brown is the guy I'm going to call. I have many people like that because I had a job where I traveled. So I was better at nurturing the relationships as I went around the country. If I was on the West Coast, I'd call Bill McCracken. I'm like, hey, Bill, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. Let's go have dinner. Because you have to keep touching those. You have to keep nurturing those relationships. You can't it's not all one-sided. So, man, that's how I consider myself wealthy, is in the relationships that I have and the many, many close friends that I have. Very blessed.
Well, talk offline about that because I believe that's the most important thing in life is relationships with others. And if you're a businessman, you must understand that long-term successful relationships are the key to business growth. They're just the key to it. And if someone wants to get their business from wherever level it is today and say they want to add, 5x it, 10x it, 100x it, the surest way is through relationship.
I agree 100%.
Surest way. Like I spoke with you when I was on your show about, I really want to break in to the oil and gas business as a speaker.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I told you that. And I told you,
yes,
I'm an amazing speaker and I'm very pro oil and gas and very anti, climate change alarmism.
Right.
And I know that a lot of these people, I'll love them and they'll love me. And I also know that at the moment, I don't have the right connections to get somebody to go, here's the check, come on down and speak for us. And what's the best way for me to do it? Well, I have a friend who's in the oil and gas business. I've been telling him, hey, can you help me out? And he says, yeah, I'll help you out. And, I'll get an intro from him. And now I know you've been in the oil and gas business. Say, hey, can you help me out? And that's how it's going to work.
That's exactly right.
That's how it's going to work. And I'm going to get my first paid speaking gig in the oil and gas industry this year as a result of the relationships I have.
I'm sure you will. I think I can help make that happen, but
Beauty.
I think that we need, that's unfortunately, the oil and gas business has so many like extremely smart people, but they're not extroverts. They're not good at public speaking. And so that's why I was successful in my business. Is I was a relationship guy. I'm a technical person, really good at the chemistry and the math and everything else, but I was kind of a hybrid because I was also a relationship guy. After I got my engineering degree, and A&M was a fabulous technical school, but I had like no coursework in psychology or anything like that. And then, I got my PE license. I joined a Toastmasters club when I'm in Austin because I'm having to do all this public speaking. And, I'm having to represent land development clients, that are trying to grow, and they're creating municipal utility districts. So we need water and wastewater and paving and drainage and airports. And then in Austin, it's the old hippie community, this keep Austin weird. We don't want anybody coming, and it was
weird, man.
It was a debate every night at a public meeting, at a city council meeting, at an urban transportation review board meeting, at, an environmental review board meeting. And so I got into all this public speaking and Toastmasters, and then I was really way more successful than my peers, but it wasn't showing up in my paycheck. And I was like, man, I think I'm ready to put some of my pay at risk on my performance. And that's when my buddy from college, a fraternity brother, a relationship, said, hey, you need to be in technical sales, man, with Nalco. You'd be great. Because you get an expense account, you get paid commission, you basically control your hours, you get a company car. And I was like, man, that sounded pretty good. And so then I went to work for Nalco, which is the world's global leader in water treatment chemicals, for anything that uses water, the power industry, the pulp and paper industry, mining and metals, refining and petrochemicals, you name it. But they have the best training. And they had this program called Counselor Selling. And man, I got all this psychology and all this other training that you don't get in college, that all about the interpersonal skills. And then that's where, it just takes off because, the oil business just gets beat up all the time. And they don't have, they have money for lobbyists, but you got to go on the rubber chicken circuit. And you got to go talk. Well, actually, I almost went to work for this in my retirement. I was looking at maybe going back to work in the Texas Energy Education Foundation. So they're trying to act. What's happening? I don't know if you knew this, Nikki, but in the last 10 years, under the Biden administration, they're saying oil's over. We're electrifying everything, and so the enrollment at the University of Texas, at LSU, at Oklahoma, at Texas A&M, in chemical engineering, petroleum engineering has dropped by like 80%.
Yeah, correct.
And there's a bunch of baby boomer guys like me that are retiring, and there's this like wide open field of fantastic, good paying jobs, and they don't have enough people going in them. So we're having to go down to like the 8th grade level and try to get kids interested in these STEM programs. And, you have to go and speak, at these public events, and the engineers don't like to do it, and so they need people like you and me, to go and say, hey, I'll stand up in the audience, and I don't have that fear of public speaking, and I'm going to do my homework, and then I'm going to refute, because what you find with, especially in this climate change area, there's not even a veneer of intelligence behind any of it. If you just look at something that every living creature that breathes exhales CO2, which, by the way, is required for photosynthesis for all green living things, and you're calling that a pollutant? It's just bogus, on the face of it.
Ridiculous.
So, I love to.
They're lying sacks of shit. Let's be honest. Everyone in the climate change alarmism industry is a lying sack of shit, or they're ignorant and stupid. There really isn't much of a middle ground. They're lying sacks of shit, or they're ignorant and stupid. If they're lying sacks of shit, then you got to treat them that way. You got to treat them like the enemy. And if they're ignorant and stupid, then, you can help them not become so ignorant, not become so stupid by educating them. But the truth of the matter is, without the energy industry, the world will stop in 4 days. And within 6 weeks, 30% of the planet will die. Within 6 weeks, within a year, 80% of humanity will die. Are you out of your freaking mind? You want to create a catastrophe of that magnitude to basically get your rocks off, get your jollies? Forget it. Forget it. You're going to have people like me come and stand up to you and whack you upside the head. And I'll speak candidly to you, David. I'm from Iran. I'm from fucking Iran. I'm not from here. My compatriots in the last little while, to demand their freedom, went into the street with their bare bodies into the mouths of guns that ripped them to shreds, demanding their freedom. I am awed by their heroism and their courage. And I'm telling you, I ain't no North American who's going to get pissed when some leftist speaks badly about me. They're in trouble. They're coming after me. They're the ones in trouble. I don't know if you ever saw this movie called The Watchmen.
No.
You ought to watch it. It's a really cool movie.
The Watchmen,
It's
okay.
not a comic, The Watchmen. But there's a character in there. His name is Rorschach, and like the Rorschach test, right?
Yeah.
And they kind of on false charges threw him in jail, and they're like trying to scare him, right? And he said to them, he said, "Oh, you think I should be scared because you've locked me up in here with you?" And then all of a sudden, his voice became real ominous, and he said, "No, you're the ones who should be scared because you're locked in here with me." And you know what I have to say to the left? You think I should be scared because you're coming after me? No, you're the ones who should be scared because you've pissed me off and woken me up. And that's how I feel. And if you put me up on an oil and gas speaking stage and I speak like this, I'm telling you, the CEOs of the major companies are going to jump up. They're going to start applauding and go, "This is our pit bull. Let him loose. Let him loose." Because that's what they need. They need somebody who's going to unapologetically stand up for the industry and tell the climate alarmists to go F themselves. And not only do I have no problem doing that, it's my pleasure and my honor to do that.
You relish the opportunity. Yes.
I do it for free, but I like to get paid very well to do it too.
Well, I've done it, but much more diplomatically. I have what I call like the Columbo approach because, we've already established that there's
awesome. What a great show.
If people are ignorant, you just kind of ask questions, then you feign ignorance yourself. Like, man, I'm just, dumb Aggie. I don't know, but could you?
Like Columbo?
Yeah, so then you ask a couple of questions. You get down to the veneer, like so okay, however you want to phrase them, and then you get them on the hook. On that last question, and you turn away. Oh wait, and what I like, actually, this is probably one of my favorite tools. Is the third party story. And it's from the Bible is the model. So when the prophet Nathan has to confront David, the king, who can have him killed in an instant right there, he tells him a story about there's these two shepherds. And this one, he only has one little lamb. This other guy has like 1,000 lambs. And he takes the one lamb from the guy and uses that for the Passover sacrifice. And what would you do, King, in that situation? And he's all righteously angry. Well, I would never tolerate that. And then it goes, that man is you. That's what you've done with Bathsheba. And so if you can tell someone a story that's kind of like the Trojan horse or the vehicle, that says, hey, I'm going to give you an illustration. And then you flip it like that and go, what, do you see that's you? And man, after they've already passed their own judgment. Yeah.
These guys like you are going to do that, but that's not me. I'm the pit bull. I'm the missile.
We need them all. We need the whole arsenal, man. That's right. Air, ground, sea, Space Force.
There you go. Well, David, I really enjoyed having you on the podcast. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. Thanks for sharing your story. God bless you. And the world needs more of us helping more men. So keep it up. Let's keep doing work together to help more men.
Hey, can I mention my book?
Yeah, bring it up. Let's
Okay.
talk.
Okay. The Savage Path, a memoir of modern masculinity.
What a cool name.
So
you have a copy there? Can you hold it up?
I do. Can you see it?
Yeah. Hold it up.
So that's
the Savage Path. All right. That's
it. That's me on the cover. That's when I was backpacking in Glacier National Park, and there's this switchback and I'm right there at the switchback. But at any rate, the whole book is it's basically a memoir, but it's using, backpacking as a metaphor, so if we're hiking along and we're trying to be under God's will, then we're on the path, but when you're not, then you're going to end up, over in the wilderness where the wild animals and the snakes and the deadfall is, and it's dangerous. And so you need to get back in God's will. I like what John Eldridge said, is that every man needs three things. He needs a work to do, a will to obey God's will, and a woman to love. And so that's what I talk about, as I go through the book. And my website is www.thesavagepath.com. And you can find out more about my podcast or about the book at the website. Thanks.
Man, I love the name of the book. And I think your book's going to do very well.
It's on, copy's on the way to you. I already mailed it Friday.
I appreciate it. I think your book's going to do really well. You're doing great work there, pal. You really are. Just keep it up and keep building relationships with folks like myself, and keep helping men. Because more and more men need that. More and more men. We need to be in groups with men, and we need to run groups of men. And that's what I have to say.
I agree.
God bless you, man.
All right. Thank you. All right, Nikki. Take care.
Yeah, you bet. All right.
Thank you for listening to the Sovereign Man Podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and become the man you've always wanted to be, we invite you to join the movement at sovereignman.ca.